What's up, hikers? I'm at the Drakensberg. We're at the hike camp.
Our little camp over there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm joined here with the man himself.
Says the man himself.
This is the person that inspired me to start hiking. And that said, Sibusiso Vilane. Thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you very much indeed. It is so humbling for me to think about that year when I traveled to your country,
Yeah.
having this idea of having the first Kenyan led and expedition to Everest,
Yeah.
where I did the interview, even though it didn't really quite work well. But the end goal of it is that now you are here, which is really amazing. I think so grateful to be in your company, in my own country, in my own sort of little mountain range. And
Yeah.
thank you for coming all the way to join us for this hike. Absolutely delighted to have
Thanks.
you.
Yeah, it's an honor for me to hike with you. So, backstory, Sibusiso is the first black person to ever summit Everest, and he's also done the Explorers Grand Slam. Could you
Yes.
explain to us what that is?
Yes. It all starts in 2003 when on the 26th of May, when I stood on the summit of Mount Everest, becoming the first black person in the world, believe it or not, to summit Everest. And when I say that, I say it very proudly because Elizabeth Hawley, who does all this recording and data, met me as in Kathmandu and said, Sibusiso, so if you summit Everest, you will not only be the first African, because there is no other black person from anywhere in the world that has yet summited a Himalayan mountain. Interesting when she said that because I'd already summited Island Peak in Pokaldi, but no other black person in the world had summited any 8,000-meter peak. So that gave me the motivation to do it, even with all my might to get to the summit, and I did. Then I came back and decided, okay, I've done with Everest, and that's the ultimate. What else? What is there to do after Everest? I think, like anyone else that would be sort of blinded by the feeling of, I reached the ultimate, you think that's it, you've arrived. But when I summarized my whole journey from when I started up until I summited Everest, I realized that for me, it wasn't a destination. Everest was my starting point to just go out all over the world and inspire a generation of Africans who never believe in limitations, who believe in themselves, who believe that they're unique as Africans. And then I embarked on the journey of the seven summits, which is climbing the highest peak in each of the seven continents, which we have. I started that journey after my second climb of Everest or summit of Everest in 2005 and did my last of the seven summits in 2008. So as I was journeying along, I heard people talking about the South Pole. The Explorer Grand Slam wasn't there as a big thing yet. The Seven Summits was. And I thought, maybe if there's anything else I can do apart from mountaineering, would be a walk to the South Pole. When that sort of ambition came bigger and bigger, then the Explorer Grand Slam came about, which is simply summiting Everest, climbing the seven summits, and walking to both poles, north and south. So I thought, how remarkable if one could do that, coming from my background, where maybe even to myself, I never thought these things were possible. But again, the impossible only exists in the mind. It's a question of, do you have the desire and the will to do the stuff? I wanted to do it and I got support. And here we speak today. I'm one of those very few in the world, probably still less than 100 people that have done the Explorer Grand Slam. I mean, for me, that's huge as an African coming from my background. And again, it's the same message. Africa can, and Africa can achieve just like anybody.
Awesome. So, what's your background,
My,
briefly?
my, my background, very briefly, is I come from a very poor upbringing, and I'm not claiming that to myself. I think there are a lot of other Africans who can share the same claim because I was about 3 years when my parents separated, which then obviously forced my mother, who was Swazi, to take me and my sister to the kingdom of Eswatini. And then I grew up in Swaziland, found that up until the age of 10, I was never at school. I was just a humbling kid who never had 3 meals a day. I was walking barefooted, no clothes to wear. But my mother never gave up on the ambition of trying to get her children get some type of form of education But because she was really struggling to bring food on the table, she'll find it near impossible to achieve that goal. But if things are to happen in your life, I believe they do. And she met a wonderful man who became my stepdad when I was 9 years old. In 1980, 10 years old, he enrolled me to grade one, and I started school at that age. People will think, ah, you were much older. I'm like, yeah, it didn't really matter for me at that point. I realized that education was the only thing I was going to use to probably shape my life or change it to what I wanted it to be, coming from such a humbling background with no home. I probably can claim that I was more of a homeless child, really, because my mother was renting little apartments here and there in townships, and it wasn't really ideal. But it sort of gave me this interest or will to one day have my own family, have my own house, and have a place where my children could hold a home. So I channeled all my energies towards that. Straight from high school, I never went to college. I never went to university because I couldn't afford it. Even all level of education, it was through the efforts of people who never really asked me to pay them back. They just were kind to do it. So with that, I just walked out and thought it's time for me to fend for myself, and my life was going to be in my hands. I became independent and worked very hard. 2.5 years working as a manual laborer in a construction company, which I really didn't like, but I had no alternative. And it taught me a lot about life and about doing things, because it told me that if you don't really love it, don't waste your time doing it. Find something else that will give you the energy in the morning to get up and go and feel energized to go to work or whatever project you are doing. So I tried, and luckily I got an interview. My second job interview was in a nature reserve in Eswatini, and I passed the interview, becoming a tourist officer and game ranger. And I stayed there for 7 years. No hiking, no camping, only just work, which I thought was really tough. But luckily in 2000 and 1999, I got a chance opportunity to go to East Africa to climb Kilimanjaro. It was courtesy of a friend who sponsored me to go. And I think that journey transformed my life, because I looked at how the porters and the guides work, and without complaining, yet the work is so tough and it's so hard. And I never complained about my job ever since, having seen how people work out there. But so that's just the sort of my background, where I come from. I'd never really wanted to climb big mountains, not even Everest, up until, and when I was 26 years old, I met John Doble, who became my friend. He was British High Commissioner working in Southern Africa. And then I started hiking at that age with him, and he's the one that inspired the mountaineering part of it, Everest mainly. And he helped me with the seven summits. He would sponsor one or two, and I would pay for my flights, and he would pay for the permit. So that's how we ended up doing it. But yeah, that is to say, I come from a humbling background, just like any other African. Maybe people would think, "Oh, he's done so much because he was wealthy from the world with gold." No, I wasn't, and I'm still not wealthy. I just take opportunities, and been very blessed with meeting wonderful people who will share my ambitions and dreams, and them willing to help me to achieve what I've achieved.
And what do you do right now?
Now I stopped game ranging. I came back from Everest, and there was a big interest in South Africa, mainly to share my story, which at first I didn't turn it into a career or into a money making project. But as I was sharing my story, I realized that people were learning a lot about life, about running businesses. So I turned it into a talk that can inspire, encourage people to just follow their dreams and strive to climb their own Everest, regardless of what it is. It takes exactly the same principles and disciplines to get to the top. It's a question of, do you want to climb your mountain, and what is it, and do you know how big it is? How many people do you need to do it? Is it going to be a solo climb, or you want a team to be part of it? So I realized that all that put together can be very motivating and inspiring. So I've been a motivational speaker since 2003 up until today. That is what makes the bulk of my income. And over and above that, because I still love outdoors, I love mountains, I organized trips which comes to the Drakensberg, maybe a couple of nights overnight, where we try to introduce people to what we've enjoyed and loved doing. That sort of plays part time in my life. So my life is evolving around running marathons socially, climbing, and hiking, all of which are all social activities.
And for someone who wants to do Everest, what tip tips of advice would you give them?
for anyone who really dreams or has the ambition to one day stand on the highest point on earth, Mount Everest, I would say start small. Don't do it like me, where I just ambitiously went from Kilimanjaro
But
to
you made
Everest.
it.
But it's because I was just given the opportunity, and that was the window of opportunity, which is
Mm.
also very critical. I realized that if I miss that chance and complaining, or which most people would do, saying, "Ah, I haven't trained enough, I need more time," I won't have made it. So I took the chance and did that. But I would say start small, start where you are, find the interest that there's something, the one thing that connects you with the mountain, and then you gradually grow to either higher than what you've been, maybe a Kilimanjaro, or but then again I say you don't. I'm not the person who advocates for just climbing this mountain and that mountain because you want to climb Everest. If you really want to go climb Everest, find a fitting mountain that will prepare you adequately for taking on an Everest, and then you go and do that. It can be done without having ticked off a list of mountains, not looking at 10 years of doing it, but you need to be specific. I want to climb Everest. What should I do? You define your mountain that will prepare you for that, and you don't have to go overseas. I found Africa is so rich in that space. You'll say, yeah, but we don't have high mountains. We don't have mountains that have got snow and ice. I'll say you would be wrong, because Mount Kenya for me is very, it's good for technical skills. The Ruwenzoris in Uganda are also equally as good for technical skills, and the fact that you still climb on a glacier travel, you can train that here in your own backyards if you're African. But if not, or if you're African that can afford to go overseas, go to the Alps, go to the Himalayas, climb 5, 6, 7,000 meter peaks, and then you go climb Everest. So it's just starting small. But the biggest for me, have the will. Don't be taken by this excitement of everyone else climbing it. You've got to want to climb Everest, because at some point you'll be asked the question, why are you here? If you're not able to answer that question, that's when you pick up your bags and go home. So it's a question of, do you really have the desire and the will to summit the mountain? And then if it's your lifetime or childhood goal or dream, then go for it.
Tips for African mountaineers.
Tips for African mountaineers. I think we should start. First of all, let us stop at looking to Europe or overseas for big mountains. Start where you are, climb the ones that are within your area which are accessible. There's quite a lot that you can do just to build up your interest, and do learn the skill, because some of these people take chances. I know that we Africans have been very worried about the preparation, so we put more time because that's us. We don't want to just go around. But I've seen some people that coming from overseas that are on the big mountain, and you look at them, you think they shouldn't be here because they've not done adequate training. So for me, it's just to prepare very well, really. And when you go, build your confidence and the skill set that is required, and do you a lot of research, because you don't want to be like me. I never researched anything about Everest. I
You just
just took
went.
my bags and I went. And when I opened my bag, I didn't know what was what.
Okay.
Do a lot of research, read about the mountain, understand the good things that happens, also the terrible things that can happen, because that is how you get mentally prepared for such. Yeah, it's just journeying along. Most of all, the other thing for Africans as a tip, it is not a cheap sport,
Mm.
and you will never get sponsorship. So it's a question of how are you going to make the money to be able to do it, because no one will sponsor you. You'll be very lucky if you get a sponsor. If you do, good luck. But most of us have struggled. So go into it knowing that it will be expensive for you and you will never get sponsorships. But it does not mean you can never dream or have the ambition to go climb mountains. But let us forget, there's mountains everywhere in the world. And the Seven Summits thing, it's just a selling point, really. It's nothing. For me, I would climb other mountains just than the Seven Summits. I wouldn't say they are a waste of time, but they certainly are not worth my penny at the moment.
So what drives you right now?
What drives me right now is the motivation has changed over the years. Even though I was very lucky that from the word go when I went to Everest, it wasn't about me. It was about to inspire Africans and encourage Africans and to show the world that Africans are capable. So what drives me today, it is still exactly the same message. I want to inspire a generation of Africans who believe in no limitations, who believe in themselves as Africans, that they are as unique as anyone and we are never inferior. We are equal to anybody and we can achieve just like anybody. So the things that I do today, going forward, I will always do with the African child in my mind. I want to inspire Africans to dream and have ambition, knowing that they can. So it's a question of if Sibusiso can do it, so can I.
Awesome. I think you can end it there. And that's Sibusiso Vilane. See you on the next one.